welcome back to the Raw Selection Private Equity Podcast. On the podcast today is Sanjay Chandra, Managing Partner of Trinity Investors, a private equity firm based out of Texas in the USA. Sanjay is going to dive into his experience as an operator, him building up his own business, growing that, and then becoming a private equity investor. We're going to talk a lot about driving those single-digit multiples into double-digit and exit multiples from there. Let's dive in. Sanjay, if you can share a brief insight into you, please.
Oh, I'm happy to. So, I am an immigrant, but I often say I came to Texas as fast as I could. The reality is my father was an immigrant, came from India to do his master's. I came as a 3-year-old to the great state of Texas. I grew up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, a pretty standard upbringing for a combination of an immigrant family and a regular American kid. I was in the Boy Scouts, became an Eagle Scout. I was a good student, graduated top of my class at a 5A high school in a suburb of Dallas. Went on to the University of Texas. You can see the Longhorn behind me, part of our persona with Texas Longhorns. But I did electrical and computer engineering, came out in the mid-'80s, and went to work in the consulting industry with Arthur Andersen Company in their consulting division. That division eventually became Accenture and split away from Arthur Andersen, but I was just there about 5 years. I have been a serial entrepreneur since starting my career at Arthur Andersen and have started two companies that I'm very proud of. The first is a furniture manufacturer based in Dallas, Texas called American Leather. It's now a group of companies and it's been renamed Artisan Lane, but another engineer and I started it in the early 90s and have grown that to a pretty sizable enterprise. I was there full time as president and CFO for 16 years before doing something in the private equity space. It's called a debt-based recapitalization, debt-based recap. It was an alternate to selling the business. We levered it up and took some of the proceeds out. But I started my second company that year in 2006 with another different partner. The partner in the first company was a gentleman named Bob Duncan, also UT engineer. I started Trinity under a different name called Trinity Advisory Group in 2006 with Dan Meter. We had a third partner named Bill Burke. We have grown Trinity to its current configuration, which is a $7 billion AUM alternate asset manager. We changed the name of the company in 2008 to Trinity Private Equity Group, and then again in 2022 to Trinity Investors. So today the firm's known as Trinity Investors. Within that firm, we have a wide variety of investments in both operating companies or what they call traditional private equity, plus other alternatives, including a lot of commercial real estate in at least 7 or 8 sectors: multifamily, industrial, senior living, hospitality, office, medical, and a few other miscellaneous categories. I've been very fortunate as a entrepreneur to have started 2 companies and have both companies be, at least from where I started from, with a very modest background, wildly successful. Neither company, of course, went public, not that big, but the American Leather's in the 300 to 400 million range and has about 1,600 employees. Trinity has about 70 people in the management company and has over 180 investments, including 24 operating companies, many of which are platforms for what we call roll-ups. We're doing acquisitions and tuck-ins. Along that whole path, I was able to raise a family. I have 3 grown children. Maybe some would call it semi-grown. They're adult, but not 100% free of their mother and I. My oldest is now doing an MBA at UCLA. Second one is about to get married in May. She lives in Spokane, and the third one lives in New York City. She graduated from Parsons School of Design 3 years ago. She's a graphic artist. Um, I've also had the great fortune of being able to do a lot of things on a philanthropic basis because of some of my success. So I'm very involved in the Boy Scouts of America. Ironically, I'm vice president of development for the Longhorn Council. No relation to UT. It just happens to be what the council, the Boy Scout Council, is called. That covers Fort Worth and Tarrant County down to just north of Austin. I'm also very involved in multiple committees and organizations with it at the University of Texas, where I went to school, my alma mater. Currently, I serve as chairman of the engineering advisory board that helps the dean of the engineering school, and so I've been on several boards there, and had the good fortune to do that. Um, but anyway, my transition over my career has been from uh, engineering student to management consultant to operator, growing and operating in a business to now an investment and financial hat. Along the way, I also got my chartered financial analyst designation, CFA, and that's actually how I met my current partner, Dan Meter. I met him when I was in the CFA program. I was a student; he was an instructor. So I've been a charter holder since 2003. Um, anyway, I know that's a lot of detail, but I hope that gives you an idea, at least, of my career path and some of what has shaped me as I've forged forward as a entrepreneur for the last 35 years.
What's one mistake that you see private equity firms or portfolio companies making, and what would you suggest to correct them?
Well, I would say we at Trinity have made a multitude of errors over time. Probably now in hindsight, and hindsight is 2020. Some of the biggest mistakes we made relate to the concept of exiting a difficult or a troubled investment um, faster. We made the mistake in several cases of holding on to things a long time and then using a lot of resources to try to make up for a problem when we should have probably pushed the eject button sooner and just admitted that there was a flawed investment strategy, uh, even if it means a total loss. And sometimes it's cheaper to stop the bleeding and get out. And I think that's a common mistake. We get emotional. We get emotionally involved in the companies and the people that we're involved with. And from an investing standpoint, that's not always the best way to do things.
How have you avoided that kind of deal from what you've learned from that? What have you done to avoid that in the future?
Well, I think you'd like to think that your processes are always improving and you're developing um, processes with an investment committee and your partners and senior management team to recognize the issues sooner and be more decisive about the exit. So we hope we've done that, but to be honest, this cycle that we're in right now, with a rapid rise in interest rates the last few years, has been the only down cycle for Trinity. And so we were the beneficiaries of a very good market for a very long time. We actually got into commercial real estate during the last big down cycle, which was the great financial crisis in 2008.
Yep.
And we did not have a legacy portfolio going into that period, so we didn't have to deal with the GFC the way that many firms did. We are, of course, dealing with a fairly sizable portfolio today, and with 180 assets and investments, we're trying our best to use these principles more rapidly right now.
Yeah. Okay. And you made that transition, for, as you mentioned, from operator to investor. What unique insights has being a operator given you as an investor?
It's been very helpful to be an operator and to understand the the things that the operators go through, the management teams, and the founders of these companies that we invest in. We invest in a category called a lower middle market. These are mostly companies that are, less than 100 million of revenue and less than 20 million of EBITDA. And these companies still have their founders involved. And so the ability to be empathetic and understand the issues and challenges of a founder and of a growing company help us, one, do better due diligence when we were looking at a company, but two, um, come in and be truly helpful to these founders in facing these challenges. I think people that came up only through a financial background don't have an understanding for those challenges. In many cases, don't have empathy for the difficulty of dealing with those challenges. I think we as a team have a lot more operating experience, and I think it serves us well when we get involved with these operators.
Sorry to interrupt. Just a quick mention of our long-standing partnership with Grata. As you will probably know, the private equity scene is constantly evolving, and deal flow is moving now to proprietary and data-driven processes. Grata provides you with the data and information of over 7 million private companies. So if you're looking to improve your proprietary deal flow and improve the data access, then reach out to Grata today. Now back to the podcast. Let's say you hadn't had that operating experience. What would you suggest to private equity investors to better connect with operators and management teams, executives, whatever you want to call them, to kind of maybe understand a little bit more of what they go through rather than just looking at finance on a piece of paper, which I know is very simplistic to
You
private
know,
equity investors.
I
But
would say that it the best thing they can do um, is to actually spend time in the operations. Not to do the flyby tours and then think they understand. They have to spend time. And when I say like roll up their sleeves and get out on the shop floor, doesn't mean go run a machine tool or do the work, but you have to spend enough time and you have to listen to the people and let them tell you about the processes, let them tell you what they do, why they do it, how they do it. Um, and there isn't substitute for the time, and that is a challenge for all of us. We're busy. I sit on multiple boards, and when I go to board meetings, they're all day. Then we have a dinner the night before. If I just kept to that much time, I would never get into the details. And so you have to allow more time, and you have to slow down. So that would be my recommendation for people coming up in private equity is to slow down, allocate the time, spend the time, and then spend the time to listen and hear what the people have to say. Uh,
so Trinity invests across a multitude of industries, as you mentioned. What sectors are you seeing the most activity in and are the most interest to you at this juncture?
well, from an investment standpoint, there's always themes that are hot, and I would say the last 10 years, one of the themes was companies that went to a SaaS framework, a software as a service. Unfortunately, every company that had anything to do with software tried to become SaaS, and the valuations in that category got crazy, and so it was hard. It was hard to compete to get invested in these companies, buy these companies. Today, that same thing is happening with AI or things that are utilizing AI.
Mhm.
They're very challenging. Trinity is not an expert in either of those categories, and we have a model where we work with some independent sponsors and jointly find the opportunities, and so we look for subject matter expertise. Now, in terms of our actual activity, we're not heavy on SaaS or AI. We have a couple companies that you could you could say touch those sectors. We are very heavy on basic industrials, including domestic manufacturing companies, companies that make a product in the U.S. on U.S. soil. And so for us, that's been um, a probably the center of our operating company activity. And we feel with what's going on right now with the election of Trump and other things, we think that domestic manufacturing will continue to be in favor. It won't get the valuations of AI or SaaS, but we also won't pay those valuations going in. And so we're talking about single digit multiples going in. And if we can grow these companies to be more of a management run format versus a founder run format, we can get them into low double digit EBITDA. So we do get expansion, but it's multiples of EBITDA or free cash flow, not of revenues. So very simple, somewhat boring to so many people, but we have domestic manufacturing companies across the U.S. And that does tie in with my background. My furniture company was 100% domestic, making all of its furniture from scratch in the U.S., which is not the most common theme. There was a long period where people were shifting to Vietnam, China, Mexico, but I think the trend is swinging back toward more domestic manufacturing.
From growing American leather, what have you learned from that process that you are championing within your portfolio companies and imploring your executives to implement based on your experience there?
So my experience was one of slow and steady progress, slow and steady growth. I sometimes joke about being the tortoise versus the hare, and I know that doesn't always fit with the private equity style, which is many companies are really good at knowing their exit as they enter the company, and then forcing an exit in 4 years or 5 years. We probably are not quite that style. We know that based at least based on my own experience growing a company, keeping a company to grow in its fifth, sixth, seventh year of growth with the compounding and the knowledge that you have of an industry or maybe some of the barriers to entry that you may have in that business. I would rather grow a company a little longer, show a little more patience, because in our own growth at American Leather, the first 10 years were so hard, and we got to a size that we had thought we would get to in 3 to 5. But the 10th to the 15th year were so rewarding financially, because that growth and the compounding in those outer years, even though they were at much lower rates, they were much bigger numbers. And I think the same thing happens in some of these companies in private equity. Now, people with fund structures, they have an obligation to sell. They have a mandate. We are fundless. We don't run funds. And because of that, we have more patience and can show more patience. If we need to hold an investment 10 years, it doesn't matter what year we bought it. We're not at the front end or the back end of a new fund or with a mandate. So we'll do what is best for the situation at hand. And we do wear a fiduciary hat for the benefit of our investors. So we do want to grow a business to maximize um, total returns. Our biggest sale in the last few years was a company we ended up in for 9 years, but we did 11 acquisitions in it, and we grew it. The ultimate sale was at a revenue size that was 5 times what we had projected in our original PPM. So good outcome for the investors, and it just took more patience.
Well, congratulations on that particular exit. Just looking at growth timeline, what do you think? You mentioned that slower pace of growth. Is that because of? I've got my own personal opinions on this, but is this because of building infrastructure within the business? Is this building experience within the people in the business? Is it brand awareness to get the buyers to come in? What do you put that down to that's needed that can't be done that you couldn't do in 3 years with American Leather, but it took longer. But then when you saw that growth, it was really solid foundations.
So it's there's no magic here. It does take time to build teams. Many times we come into a company and have to make decisions about adding or replacing people. We quite often in our investments have to upgrade facilities, and those are not instantaneous, right? You can't snap a finger. We don't just pick up a plant and move it. We typically add on to the plant or add a second plant on the other coast or something like that. And that takes time. And then we do something else because these young founder-run companies, so I should say smaller founder-run companies, quite often they don't have even ERP systems. And so, taking them from QuickBooks and spreadsheets to some form of an ERP system takes time and planning and takes implementation effort. And so our hope in all of our deals is that we don't have to do all three. We don't want to upgrade management, change facilities, and replace systems. But we quite often have to do one or two of those three. They just take time, right? You can't do everything at once. There probably are groups out there that are much bigger than Trinity or work in the middle market, much larger companies that can bring in the teams and do all that at once. Do some of that simultaneously. That's not our style. And so at the lower middle market, the feelings of the founders and the requests of the family are quite important. Sometimes it's even as simple as keeping their name on the business for longer. But you have to show um, respect for what they built and how long it took them to build it. And you can't come in and act like you already know everything about their industry. We have a lot of smart people, but it doesn't mean we know what they know. And so there's a certain amount of time learning about their industry, spending time with them, with their customers, spending time at trade shows. But it's a multi-year process. It is very hands-on. You do have to roll up your sleeves to do that. But the patience is rewarded. Again, everyone knows the fable: the tortoise always wins.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm yet to meet a private equity investor that has been excellently trained in securing and attracting top talent for their portfolio companies. Therefore, I've written a brand new book exactly on that topic. I've collated all of the information from my years in executive search and spoken to some of the top private equity investors and put this all into a brand new book. We're giving away the first 100 copies to anyone who joins the waiting list. Check out the show notes and get your name down for this brand new book. So, in the some research I've done, it talks a lot about kind of mentorship for you and leadership and the importance of that. What are you doing around that? Why is that such a passion for you? Talk to us a bit about it.
So I have been, obviously fortunate to have had two long, extended, run-ups with two companies, both American Leather and Trinity. And that process, and staying in these companies in longer periods over, 16 years in the first full time. I'm in year 35 with American Leather, but the last 18 as a board member, as vice chairman. When I take the long view on things, it gives me the time to identify good people and then use my knowledge and experience to help them grow as individuals. Again, that can't be done. There's no magic formula. I don't show up with a magic playbook. But when I identify these people within these organizations, quite often they're the CEO of a company, or a new independent sponsor, a sponsor in some commercial real estate aspect. And so I've had the benefit of doing it multiple times within our operating companies, and multiple times within our real estate and development companies. And I do believe that's one of the ways I can give back. Um, in addition to giving, obviously, to charitable institutions like the Boy Scouts and the University of Texas, I like being able to give to people, but not through money, but through mentorship. And it's really satisfying when I see a young person that 5 or 7 or 10 years later has evolved into someone that's very experienced and very successful. Quite often, of course, in our space, we measure that by financial success, but there's a lot more to their growth with leadership and people than just financial success. The financial success just makes it easy to measure.
Okay. Okay. And what are your influences, Sanjay? What do you read? What do you watch? What do you listen to? Do you recommend others check out?
I'm an avid, I'll call it reader, but it's actually not a reader. Listen to books and audio tape, or through my iPhone, through Audible. Many weeks I finish a large book, and I'm a little bit too impatient or too hyper to just sit still. Um, I don't even sit at this chair at my desk. I'm standing, walking most of the time. I like to do two things at one, which isn't probably the best method, but at least when I do things like work out or do other less difficult tasks, I like to listen to audiobooks, and I do a combination of nonfiction and fiction.
Uh-huh.
Um, the latest one that I listened to is the most recent biography of Elon Musk by Isaacson.
Yes.
Just it's amazing hearing the insights on what shaped Elon and listening to the details of what's going on behind the scenes over, four or five different companies that have taken decades for him to build. But he's an amazing person, and I gain insights from these. So I do listen to a lot of books. I try to take what I can from these as knowledge and add to my experience base, and to the extent that I can and learn and get better at things, I try. But that's something I've been doing all my life. I am a lifelong learner. I am intellectually curious. I was I was a little bit of a standout in terms of my age when I went into the CFA program in '99. Uh, you know, Most people do that at age 23, and I was doing it at age 35 after having my third child. Right, so my third child was very small, very young. My kids were all pretty close together. Yet I chose to take on that task, and it was a 3-year process back then. I think it's a little faster now because of the online tests they do.
Uh-huh.
Uh, But I would encourage anyone um, to continue that process because even at my current age, I think an old dog can learn new tricks. I am trying to teach myself more and more about AI and use of AI agents right now. It's fascinating to me as a uh, an electrical and computer engineer with a lot of software background. I can't for the life of me figure out how LLMs work, but my goal is to at least understand what they're doing to do what they do. I'm amazed. And of course, technology, at the pace that it moves, I think all of us have to keep up with it, regardless of our age. We can't settle for just trying to be old school. Uh, And so I want to, even at 59, keep learning. Um, who knows? I may even go back one day and get an MBA. I do not have an MBA, but it's been a great experience, growing growing multiple companies, uh, and and I guess getting the MBA from my own entrepreneurial experiences.
MBA of experience, absolutely. If anybody wishes to reach out, Sanjay, how best do they get in touch with you, please?
The best way to reach me is really through my email, and it's quite simple. It's Sanjay, Sanjy at trinityinvestors.com. They could go to our website, and you can see my bio, my partners, and our emails are listed there as well. So we are happy to take um, I'm happy to take connections from people. I am on LinkedIn as well, and you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I do see messages on LinkedIn, and I look at requests to connect regularly. So happy to do that as well. I won't give out my cell number today because then I'll be inundated with uh, I guess scam calls or something. I'm not sure who gets those numbers, but someone does. Um, but anyway, Sanjay at trinityinvestors.com.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much for coming on, Sanjay, giving us your unique insight from operator to investor and now running your own private equity firm. So thank you for sharing everything you have done today.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Alex. Thank you for having me.
And also, thank you very much to all of our listeners out there tuning in yet again to the Private Equity Podcast. Till the next time, keep smashing it, and thank you very much for listening.